The Kythara had ruled the Outer Rim territories for 3 millennia, their reputation as apex predators preceding them to every world they encountered. Standing nearly 3 meters tall with obsidian carapaces and razor-sharp talons, they were evolution's perfect killing machines. Their society was built on a simple principle: only the strong deserve to survive, and only the strongest deserve to lead. Commander Vex'tal of the Kythara Dominion stood on the bridge of his dreadnought, the Crimson Fong, as it descended through Earth's atmosphere. His 4 amber eyes surveyed the blue-green world below with predatory interest. Intelligence reports suggested the species, humans, possessed rudimentary technology and basic pack-hunting instincts, but nothing that would pose a significant challenge to Kythara superiority. Initial scans complete, Commander, reported his lieutenant, Zarketh. Population centers identified. Military installations are primitive kinetic weapons, chemical propellants. Their largest settlements house millions of individuals. Vex'tal's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his kind. Millions clustered together like prey animals. They'll scatter at the first sign of a true predator. But Vex'tal was no ordinary Kythara commander. He had risen through the ranks not just through strength, but through cunning. Before claiming this world, he would test these humans properly. The Kythara way demanded it. "Prepare the proving pods," he commanded. "We will leave our young in their largest settlement and observe. If these humans are worthy prey, they will fight. If they are mere scavengers—" He left the sentence unfinished, his claws extending slightly. The proving pods were a sacred tradition. Young Kythara cubs, barely past their first molt, would be placed in hostile territory. If they survived through their own strength and cunning, they would earn their place among the warriors. If not, they were unworthy of the bloodline. But this time, Vex'tal had modified the test. The pods would be programmed to emit a distress beacon, not to Kythara ships but to human receivers. He wanted to see how these creatures would react to helpless young ones that were clearly not of their species. 3 pods launched from the Crimson Fong in the dead of night, their stealth systems masking them from human detection until the moment of impact. They struck Earth at calculated points. 1 in the heart of New York City, 1 in rural Kansas, and 1 in a small coastal town in Norway. Each pod contained a single Kythara cub, no more than 6 months old, along with basic life support and the modified distress beacon. The cubs were weak by Kythara standards, the runts of their respective litters, but even a young Kythara possessed claws capable of shredding steel and a bite force that could crack concrete. As the pods cooled in their impact craters, Vex'tal settled in to watch. Surveillance drones, invisible to human technology, took position around each site. What happened next would determine whether humanity would be conquered quickly or slowly. He expected the humans to flee in terror. Perhaps some of the more aggressive males might attempt to attack the cubs, providing brief entertainment. What he did not expect, what no Kythara could have predicted, was about to unfold on the screens before him. The first humans to respond weren't soldiers or hunters. In New York, it was Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a veterinarian who had been driving home from an emergency call when the pod crashed into Central Park. In Kansas, it was retired teacher William "Bill" Thompson, who ran a small animal shelter from his farm. In Norway, it was marine biologist Astrid Larsen, whose research station was barely 2 kilometers from the impact site. As the 3 humans approached their respective crash sites, Vex'tal leaned forward in his command throne. The test had begun. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had seen her share of unusual cases in 20 years of veterinary practice, but nothing had prepared her for what she found in the crater in Central Park. The metallic pod had cracked open like an egg, revealing something that looked like a cross between a reptile and an insect. The creature was roughly the size of a large dog, with midnight black scales and 6 limbs that ended in wickedly sharp claws. But what struck Elena most wasn't the creature's alien appearance. It was the soft whimpering sounds it made, and the way it curled in on itself, clearly injured and afraid. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered, pulling her emergency kit from her truck. The creature's breathing was labored, and she could see a deep gash along its flank where it had been thrown against the pod's interior during impact. On the Crimson Fong, Vex'tal watched in confusion as the human female approached his young warrior without fear. What is she doing? He growled to his lieutenant. Perhaps she intends to capture it for study? Zarketh suggested uncertainly, but Elena's actions suggested no such thing. Moving slowly and speaking in soothing tones, she began to examine the cub's injuries. When the frightened creature snapped at her, its tiny fangs easily capable of severing her fingers, she didn't retreat. Instead, she wrapped it gently in a blanket, supporting its head as she lifted it toward her vehicle. Sure, it's okay, she murmured. I know you're scared. I'm going to help you. Similar scenes were playing out at the other crash sites. In Kansas, Bill Thompson approached the second cub with the same calm demeanor he used with injured wildlife. The creature had managed to crawl from its pod but collapsed near a creek, its breathing shallow and rapid. Well, I'll be, Bill muttered, crouching down beside the alien youngling. Never seen anything like you before, but hurt is hurt. He'd spent 40 years helping creatures that couldn't help themselves. This one might be from another world, but it was still just a scared, injured baby. In Norway, Astrid Larsson's scientific mind raced as she studied the third cub, but her human compassion acted first. The creature was hypothermic, its alien physiology struggling with Earth's colder climate. Without hesitation, she activated the emergency heating units from her research station and began warming the pod area while the cub remained inside, too weak to move. On the Kythara ship, the command crew watched in stunned silence as 3 humans, independently without communication between them, made the same impossible choice. Instead of fleeing or attacking, they were helping. This makes no sense, Zarketh muttered. The cubs could kill them easily. Why are they not defending themselves? Vex'tal's 4 eyes narrowed as he observed the feeds. Elena had transported the first cub to her veterinary clinic, where she was now running 4 fluids and treating its wounds with the same care she would show any injured animal. The cub, weakened by its ordeal, had stopped struggling and seemed to be responding to her gentle touch. In Kansas, Bill had carried the second cub to his farmhouse, where he'd fashioned a makeshift bed near his fireplace. The creature watched him warily as he prepared what looked like a simple meal, warm milk mixed with raw meat, carefully presented in a shallow bowl. Don't know what you eat, partner, Bill said softly. But this here's what I give the orphaned fox kits. Figure it might work for you too. The third cub in Norway was receiving similar treatment from Astrid, who had contacted colleagues at the university not to report a dangerous alien, but to request advice on treating hypothermia in unknown species. Commander, Zarketh said slowly, they're caring for them like they would their own young. Vex'tal said nothing. In 3 millennia of Kythara expansion, they had encountered countless species. Some fought bravely before being conquered. Others submitted immediately. A few had tried to bargain or negotiate, but never, not once, had they encountered a species that would spontaneously care for the young of a potential enemy. The cubs, for their part, seemed as confused as their distant parents. Kythara society was harsh from birth. Cubs learned to fight for food, to show no weakness, to trust no one completely. Yet here they were, being offered food freely, being protected, being loved. By the end of the first day, all 3 cubs were stable. Elena had successfully treated the first cub's internal injuries and was monitoring its progress. Bill's patient was eating regularly and had even started following him around the farm. Astrid's cub was recovering from its hypothermia and showed signs of remarkable intelligence, seeming to understand that she was helping it. But the real test was yet to come. Word of the meteor crashes was beginning to spread, and soon more humans would arrive. Military personnel, government officials, scientists, all the representatives of humanity that Vex'tal expected would show the species' true nature. He ordered the surveillance drones to maintain their positions. Phase 2 of the test was about to begin. Major David Park of the U.S. Army's Xenobiology Division arrived at Dr. Rodriguez's clinic 3 days after the initial contact, expecting to find either a dead alien or a severely traumatized veterinarian. What he found instead challenged everything he thought he knew about first contact protocols. The alien cub was alert and active, following Elena around the clinic like an oversized, scaly puppy. When it saw the armed soldiers accompanying Major Park, It immediately moved between Elena and the perceived threat, despite being barely half the size of the humans. "Dr. Rodriguez," Major Park began, "I need you to step away from the entity. We have protocols for—" "His name is Onyx," Elena interrupted firmly, placing a protective hand on the cub's head. The creature, Onyx, pressed against her legs and made a sound that was unmistakably a purr. "And he's just a baby who was hurt and scared. Ma'am, that baby has claws that could disembowel you and bite force readings off the charts. Our scans show he has a fever reducer in his system because he was running a temperature yesterday." Elena cut him off again. "And those claws you're worried about? He uses them to very carefully take treats from my hand without scratching me." As if to demonstrate, Elena produced a piece of raw meat from her pocket. Onyx took it delicately, his razor-sharp talons never coming close to her skin. Major Park stared. In the briefing, they'd described the creature as a potential biological weapon. Looking at it now, all he could see was the alien equivalent of a rescued kitten. Similar scenes were playing out at the other locations. In Kansas, a team of CDC scientists had arrived to find Bill Thompson teaching the second cub, who he'd named Shadow, to play fetch. The sight of a potentially dangerous xenobiological specimen happily chasing a tennis ball while an elderly farmer cheered it on had left the research team speechless. "You do realize," Dr. Jennifer Walsh from the CDC told Bill, "that this creature could probably tear through a steel door?" Bill looked down at Shadow, who was currently trying to figure out how to get his tennis ball from where it had rolled under the porch. "Mike could be, Doc, but right now he's just trying to get his toy back. Mind giving him a hand there?" Dr. Walsh found herself, almost against her will, crawling under the porch to retrieve a tennis ball for an alien predator, who thanked her with what could only be described as a happy chirp. In Norway, the response was equally unprecedented. Astrid had been contacted by CERN, NASA, and a dozen other scientific organizations, all demanding access to the alien. But when the international research team arrived, they found the cub, christened Frost by Astrid, had bonded so thoroughly with the marine biologist that separation attempts caused it visible distress. The psychological trauma of forced separation could damage our ability to study its cognitive development, Astrid argued to the UN Science Committee via video call, while Frost napped contentedly in her lap. "He's demonstrating remarkable learning capacity and social integration. Disrupting this bond now would be scientifically counterproductive." From orbit, Vex'tal watched the human response with growing bewilderment. Instead of the expected military containment and experimentation, he was witnessing something unprecedented. An entire species mobilizing to protect and understand 3 alien cubs that weren't even their own kind. News of the Star Children, as the media had dubbed them, spread across the globe. Instead of panic or demands for their destruction, humans responded with overwhelming curiosity and protective instincts. Children sent drawings and toys. Scientists offered their expertise. Volunteers showed up at all 3 locations offering to help care for the cubs. But the most telling moment came when a fringe military group attempted to raid Elena's clinic, intending to capture Onyx for weapons research. The cubs' distress calls, sounds that had never been heard before on Earth, brought not just Elena running, but a crowd of New Yorkers who had appointed themselves the creature's unofficial guardians. "Touch him and you'll answer to us," declared Mrs. Chun, an 80-year-old grandmother who had started bringing homemade meals for Elena and the baby. Behind her stood a diverse crowd of humans. Construction workers, teachers, office employees, students, all united in their determination to protect a creature they'd known existed for less than a week. The would-be raiders retreated without firing a shot, faced with the unexpected reality of an entire community willing to defend an alien child. On the Crimson Fong, Vex'tal's command crew watched in silence as the feeds showed similar scenes from around the globe. Humans who had never met were coordinating efforts to ensure the cubs' well-being. Scientists were sharing research freely instead of hoarding it for military advantage. Children were creating art depicting humans and young Kythara playing together. "Commander," Zarketh said quietly, "permission to speak freely?" Vex'tal nodded, his attention still fixed on the screens. "In 3,000 years of conquest, we've never seen anything like this. They're treating our young better than we treat our own. It was true, and Vex'tal knew it. Young Kythara who showed weakness were abandoned or culled. These humans had taken 3 injured alien cubs and not only healed them, but welcomed them into their communities as if they were treasured family members. The test had revealed something about humanity that no amount of military reconnaissance could have discovered. But it had also revealed something about the Kythara that Vex'tal was not prepared to confront. Phase 3 of the test was about to begin, and for the first time in his military career, the Kythara commander was not certain he wanted to see the results. 6 weeks after the initial crash, the 3 Kythara cubs had become fully integrated into human society. Onyx could be found each morning at a coffee shop near Elena's clinic, where the barista had learned to prepare a special alien smoothie of raw meat and nutrients. Shadow had become the unofficial mascot of Bill's town, with local children lining up after school to play with their space puppy. Frost had learned to assist Astrid with her marine research, his superior underwater vision helping to spot species that human eyes couldn't detect. But the most remarkable development was their rapid language acquisition. All 3 cubs had begun to understand and even attempt to reproduce human speech patterns. Their first words, across all 3 locations, had been the same, "Thank you." On the Crimson Fong, Vex'tal made a decision that would have been unthinkable when he first arrived at Earth. He opened a communication channel to the 3 human caretakers simultaneously. The holographic projector in each location hummed to life, displaying the imposing figure of the Kythara commander. Elena dropped her coffee mug. Bill nearly fell off his porch. Astrid's scientific instruments crashed to the floor as she stumbled backward. But in each location, the cubs' reaction was immediate and identical. They placed themselves protectively between their human guardians and the image of their biological father. "I am Commander Vex'tal of the Kythara Dominion." His translated voice boomed through the speakers. "Those young ones you have been caring for are my offspring." Elena was the first to find her voice. "Your children." She looked down at Onyx, who was making threatening sounds at his father's image while staying firmly planted between Elena and the hologram. "You abandoned your children?" The accusation hit Vex'tal like a physical blow. In Kythara society, the proving was sacred, necessary. But through human eyes, through the eyes of creatures who would risk their lives to save young that weren't even their own species. "It was a test," he said, his voice losing some of its commanding tone, "to determine the strength of your species." "A test?" Bill's voice cracked with outrage. "You used babies as bait in some kind of test?" In Norway, Astrid was recording everything while simultaneously checking Frost's vital signs. The cub was clearly agitated, recognizing the voice but showing none of the submission that young Kythara typically displayed toward their elders. "They were weak," Vex'tal continued, following the script he had planned. "By Kythara law, they should have been culled. Instead, they were given a chance to prove themselves worthy." "Weak." Elena's voice rose to a shout. "Onyx isn't weak. He's intelligent, loyal, brave, and loving. He protects the smaller animals at the clinic. He's learned to open doors to help patients escape if there's an emergency. And yesterday he comforted a dying cat by staying with it all night. Shadow ain't weak either," Bill added, his weathered face flushed with anger. "He's got more heart than most humans I know. He helped me find old Murphy when my dog got lost in the woods. And he won't eat until he's sure every other animal on the farm has been fed." Astrid's voice was clinical but no less furious. "Frost has demonstrated problem-solving abilities beyond anything we've seen in terrestrial species. He's figured out complex research equipment, shown empathy toward injured marine life, and displays emotional intelligence that surpasses most adult humans. If this is what you consider weak, then your definition of strength is fundamentally flawed." Vex'tal stared at the screens. The cubs weren't cowering before his authority as they should have been. Instead, they were protecting their humans. From him. From their own father. "You do not understand," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The Kythara are warriors. Only the strong. The strong protect those who can't protect themselves," Elena interrupted. "The strong build communities. The strong sacrifice for others. If your idea of strength is abandoning children, then you're not strong, you're just cruel. On the bridge of the Crimson Fong, something unprecedented was happening. Kythara crew members were watching the feeds with expressions that had no name in their language. Some of the younger warriors were making soft sounds. Sounds that hadn't been heard in Kythara space for generations. Lieutenant Zarketh approached his commander cautiously. "Sir, the crew is unsettled. They're asking questions about the young ones we left on the training worlds. Questions about their own cubs." Vex'tal had opened a channel expecting to demonstrate human weakness before claiming the planet. Instead, he was watching his own offspring choose alien strangers over their biological father. Worse, he was beginning to understand why. The test was to determine if humans were worthy prey or worthy enemies. He said slowly, more to himself than to the humans. "But you are neither. Then what are we?" Elena asked, still stroking Onyx's head as the cub maintained his protective stance. Vex'tal was quiet for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited for orders that weren't coming. Below, 3 human communities had united around the simple act of caring for children that weren't their own. "I do not know," he admitted finally. "In 3,000 years of expansion, we have never encountered anything like your species. You took our young, healed them, protected them, loved them. You turned potential weapons into family. Because that's what they are," Bill said simply. "They're kids. Doesn't matter where they come from or what they look like. Kids need taking care of." For the first time in his adult life, Vex'tal felt something that Kythara had no word for: shame. He looked at his offspring on the screens. Healthy, happy, loved, and realized that in 6 weeks with humans, they had grown more than most Kythara young did in their first year. The test had revealed the truth about humanity, but it had also revealed a truth about the Kythara that would change everything. The standoff lasted for 3 days. Vex'tal's fleet remained in orbit while humanity held its breath. Military forces across the globe prepared for invasion while simultaneously coordinating the protection of 3 alien cubs who had become symbols of hope rather than fear. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the cubs themselves. On the morning of the 4th day, Onyx approached the communication console in Elena's clinic. His speech was still halting, but his message was clear. "Want, talk, father. Want, explain." Similar requests came from Shadow and Frost. Despite their obvious fear and anger toward Vex'tal, they wanted to communicate with their biological parent. But they insisted their human guardians remain present. The conversation that followed was unlike anything in recorded Kythara history. "Father," Onyx began, his young voice carrying a dignity that surprised even Elena, "you left us to die." Vex'tal's 4 eyes fixed on his youngest son. "It was the proving. All young Kythara must." "Elena did not leave me to die," Onyx interrupted, a behavior that would have meant severe punishment in Kythara society. "Elena saved me, fed me, held me when scared. This is strength." From Kansas, Shadow's voice joined in. "Bill teaches patience, teaches kindness, shows pack protects all, even weak, even different. Frost learns." The 3rd cub added from Norway. "Astrid shows questions good, learning good, helping others, strongest thing." Vex'tal found himself unable to respond. His offspring were lecturing him on strength, and their words carried more wisdom than most Kythara elders possessed. "You came to test humans," Elena said quietly, "but I think they've been testing you instead. These children have shown you something about your own species, haven't they?" The Kythara commander's silence stretched until Lieutenant Zarketh stepped forward. "Permission to speak, sir?" Vex'tal nodded absently. "The crew has been talking about the cubs, about how they've grown with the humans." Zarketh paused, choosing his words carefully. "Many of us have young on the training worlds, young who face the proving alone. We're wondering if what, Lieutenant? If there might be another way, a better way." On the screens, The three cubs watched their father with a mixture of hope and wariness. Behind them, their human families waited, ready to fight an entire alien armada, if necessary, to protect three children who had chosen love over fear. Vex'tal made a decision that would echo throughout Kythara space for generations to come. "I formally request an audience with the leaders of Earth," he announced. "Not as a conqueror, but as a student. We came to test your species, but you have shown us truths about our own that we had forgotten." The response from Earth was swift and unanimous. The request was granted on one condition. The cubs would remain with their chosen families, and any future contact between Kythara and humans would be based on mutual respect and the welfare of all children involved. 3 months later, the first Kythara cultural exchange program began. Young Kythara warriors, instead of facing the brutal proving, were given the option to spend time with human families, learning about cooperation, empathy, and protective strength rather than just predatory dominance. The changes rippled through Kythara society. The proving was modified, then eventually abandoned. Child-rearing practices evolved to emphasize guidance over abandonment. The rigid hierarchy that had defined their civilization for millennia began to soften. Elena continued her veterinary practice, but now consulted on xenobiology projects across the galaxy. Onyx, fully grown but still protective of his adoptive mother, had become the first Kythara ambassador to Earth. Bill's farm became a training ground for young Kythara learning agricultural cooperation. Shadow, now the size of a small horse but still playful as a puppy, helped teach patience and community responsibility to cubs from both species. Astrid's research station evolved into the premier interspecies behavioral studies facility in the sector. Frost, whose intelligence had only grown with time, co-authored papers on empathetic problem-solving that revolutionized Kythara educational philosophy. But perhaps the most significant change was in Vex'tal himself. The former commander had stepped down from military service to establish the first Kythara orphanage, a concept that hadn't existed in their language before encountering humanity. He spent his days caring for abandoned cubs, teaching them that strength came not from conquering others, but from lifting them up. The test had been designed to measure human weakness. Instead, it had revealed the greatest strength any species could possess: the willingness to protect and nurture the vulnerable, regardless of origin, appearance, or potential threat. In the end, humanity hadn't just passed the test. They had taught their examiner that the test itself was wrong. And in doing so, they had gained not just allies but family among the stars. The galaxy would never be the same.